I'm Sarah Wilson and you're listening to the Roots and All podcast. I'm here to help you get growing. Join me as I explore everything plant related both indoors and out and provide the information you need to create your perfect green environment. Hello and welcome to this episode of the podcast. This episode is the hotly anticipated part 3 of the Design Expert series, and this week's guest is South African garden designer Leon Kluge, who runs a design practice in Cape Town. This series has very kindly been sponsored by the London College of Garden Design, which is based in the UK at Kew Gardens, and they've recently launched the London College of Garden Design in Melbourne, based at the Royal Botanic Gardens Victoria, so that may be of interest to Australian listeners. As Leon mentions in the episode, many budding South African garden designers train abroad, and I've had the pleasure of meeting some of them at LCGD, where they've been studying, and I've been bowled over by their creative use of plants that I could only dream of using in a design here in the UK. And Leon does go on to talk about the wide range of plants that he has available to him. I spoke to Leon about his work and the particular set of challenges he faces in South Africa, and let's just say you might think twice that it's time you moan about aphids. I started out by asking Leon to explain the ethos behind his design business.
On all the landscapes that we install is it's a relaxed, very natural landscape where we try to incorporate very interesting and unusual flora from especially South Africa. So we're all about plants and preserving and promoting plants, especially South African plants, and on top of that, Western Cape plants, the fynbos, which is so special in its entirety here, and it's only here. So we are very lucky to be able to be surrounded by this incredible kingdom of plants that we have here in the Cape, and that is our prerogative, actually, to promote it and grow it. And also, when we do our gardens, it's not just taking the common plants that's available to the design. We also go on hikes and walks constantly and trying to find new plants and introduce new species into the landscape and horticultural world in this part of South Africa.
That's interesting. So when you're going on a hike, if you see a plant that you like, how would you then introduce that into a garden? Do you kind of then try and source it or get it propagated?
Yeah, so when we go on hikes and we see something that has potential, which is quite often, because we are very closely knit with Kirstenbosch, and I do the Chelsea Flower Show for them too. So we have the resource over there to get some seed, to get cuttings, or to be able to go to an area where they do conservation and get permission to get some seed. And then we provide that to growers for us to grow. And then they do that.
Mm-hmm. And is it easier actually to do that than it is to source plants that are maybe non-native?
No, non-native plants is much easier to source. To get native plants is the tricky part. We have a lot of native plants that are easy to grow, and that's all available. But those are also available in the nurseries and garden centres in the UK. But it's those other ones that's a little bit more tricky, and those things have such great potential, and that's what we want to try and promote. So it's not just the plants that grow and you can sell them 5 times a year over. It's some of the other things too that we try to promote in SA.
It's almost a celebration, isn't it, of your native flora, incorporating that in your design?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So that's our main focus, is to promote our own flora, and that's also why we do the international shows like Chelsea, and that's to take all of those very rare species and take them over there to showcase them there. And we always get very interesting people that come and look at our stand in the Grand Marquis and inquire about those species, and then contact the seed bank here in South Africa to get them to be grown abroad. We've done many shows, say for instance in Singapore, where we've taken seed over to be grown in Malaysia, and it's now been adopted by nurseries to grow permanently there for their market, so which is quite nice.
So what sort of projects do you normally work on? Do they tend to be residential gardens, or are they public spaces?
Yeah, so it's a mix. It's an absolute mix. So we do have, being here in the Cape, we do a fair amount of wine estates, private homes mainly, public gardens, one or two, but not too many. I think our clientele are more the individual, and I quite like that. Each one with their own personality and their own quirks. And to me, that's more fun to work with. That's more challenging in a lot of ways too. But a public mall or something like that's not my first love. Yeah, we don't have, unfortunately, in South Africa, a lot of public parks. We've got Kirstenbosch and some botanical gardens, but public parks per se in the cities, we don't have much of that.
Yeah, it's interesting to get it's a totally different take on the whole garden design industry, really, which kind of takes me on to another question, which is if you wanted to train as a garden designer in South Africa, do you have many options to do that?
No, we don't. No, not at all. So quite a few of the garden designers go abroad to train if need be. But in the same breath of air, we don't have a lot of garden designers coming through the ranks. It's not a profession that is highly popular in SA. We have some very good designers here, but not a lot. And it's not a profession that is in the public eye. You know, it's usually professions where the people drive the Mercs that catches the eye. Yeah,
Right.
and and when it comes to gardening, also, you need to. I strongly believe that the love for plants and gardening starts from a very young age, and it's usually a big influence from the parents or the grandparents as well. And if that doesn't happen, which I think in South Africa is more and more the case, because a lot of people grow up in apartments or in very densely populated areas where there's hardly any green spaces. So how do you learn that love for the green space? Yes, you go to a big open field or a lawn to go and play, but there's no individual contact with plants per se. And to learn to understand plants in our education system in South Africa, plants definitely, even biology for that matter, is not very front up when it comes to education here.
So, in terms of gardens and horticulture as a whole in South Africa, is it a big thing? I mean, obviously in Britain we are completely bonkers for it, but
Yes,
is
I'm
there the same
jealous.
culture in South Africa?
um, in some parts, I'm very lucky in Cape Town. Gardening is definitely strong, but must also remember that gardening also falls into priorities. And so most of South African population are not doesn't have the spare change really to maintain a green space around the house, or even buy the seeds for that matter. So it's a tough question to answer. So yes, I think a lot of people do adore gardens and do love flowers, but when it comes to the practicality of it, space and money, I think that's where the issue comes in.
So, if somebody had or had an outdoor space and not so much money to garden it, is that where people might be growing food, for example?
Yes, most definitely. That space will be occupied by either, you say, corn or pumpkins or even chickens. So definitely, without a doubt. But saying that in the same breath, we had our first international flower show here in Johannesburg, end of last year, and everybody loved it and came from far and about to come and look at the show and look at all aspects of gardening. So that was very, very heartwarming to see that there's still a very strong connection with greenery, although not a lot of people can have that in their space.
No. I mean, we do have a slight problem in the UK certainly in terms of training people, but also trying to get people interested in horticulture, particularly at the grassroots level of becoming, say, a maintenance gardener. Do you have that problem too?
Yeah, we do, most definitely. It's in huge short supply, I would say. But what I do, appreciate from countries like the UK is always a very strong, from my point of view, a very strong projection of gardening from the RHS and trying to bring it into the public eye always. Like for the Hampton Court show or the Chelsea show, all the other shows that they have. And that is something that we are working on here in Africa. And that's the only way. It's the runway for gardening. Everybody, if you're very interested in clothes, whether you can afford it or not, you always look at the tabloids and see what's the new fashion out there, or what's the new trends, whether you like it or not, or it sparks an idea, and maybe that brings you into future to go and study that. And that's the same with gardening. So when I grew up, I always used to look at the magazines and see what's new at Chelsea or Hampton Court or any of those shows. We didn't have any of that. And that's a big part of where my love for gardening came from. And that's from the UK.
Talking about that, what trends are you noticing, whether they be sparked by the UK or they're just growing kind of grassroots up in South Africa?
I think a lot more focus on interesting plants here, and I think it's in a lot of places. It's not so much just the pretty flower. It's also about a lot of interesting plants, putting nutrients back in soil, bringing the local wildlife into your space, and plants that's not often used. For instance, at a beautiful garden that was last year at Chelsea from Andy Sturgeon, that woodland garden with all the different textures of greens and interesting flowers. Might not have been roses or any of those bright in-your-face flowers, but still grabbed a lot of attention. And I think that's kind of where things go from here. But also, in the same breath of air, is that edible gardens, gardens that gives you a meditative feel. That's also definitely grabbing headlines here in South Africa.
Yes, very much the same here. When you talk about bringing the wildlife into the garden, are you seeing problems with native wildlife? Are they kind of dropping in numbers as they are over here?
In certain areas, of course, but I think there's a big drive in South Africa, especially in my area where I am in the Cape, to bring wildlife to your garden. So most of the new areas or new malls are all planted with plants that only grow in the area, endemic to the West Coast or endemic to Table Mountain, more planted in the city, and that is definitely helping us with populations of birds. So I think the city of Cape Town, as much as they can, are doing a pretty good job at providing habitats for the bird life. So I don't think we are having a shortage of, we can always do more, but I think the public sector here in the Cape is doing a pretty good job.
Well, that's good to hear. So do you think with the increased interest in plants that hard landscaping is kind of declining in popularity at all? Is that a trend?
Yes, definitely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Which I'm glad in a sense, because landscaping and it's also about plants, right? And promoting different kinds of plants. Plants can also provide a lot of architecture in a garden. It's not just the pergola. So I'm quite happy that there's more focus on plants and on different species and what grows with you and what not, than just focus on the paving and the water feature. And we don't have water in the Western Cape. It's our biggest issue. About a year ago, we had nothing. So luckily we had some rain, but Cape Town stood together. We really reduced our usage of water in the city tremendously, and we adapted our gardens mostly to local endemic plants too, and taking out a lot of the water features around the city. We don't need those water features. They're in any case treated, so it's not great for any greenery in the water. So rather keep and maintain and our healthy ecosystems, all the little rivulets that come from Table Mountain going into the sea, rather spend that money on that and keep that clean and neat and tidy and get the birds to go to those areas than a fancy chlorine water feature.
Yeah. So what other barriers are there to gardening in terms of climate? If obviously water is one, are you facing any other challenges?
Yeah, water is a big one. Heat is, we have certain times of the year where 40 degrees is nothing funny. So that I would say is the biggest. And then, as I said in the beginning, is availability of variety of plants. That is a big one. But that's slowly but surely coming right. But otherwise, if you're in an area where we've got some antelope and bookies and giraffes and things, yes, that could be an issue. That could be a challenge.
How do you keep a giraffe out of your garden?
Oh my goodness! If you can tell me, then I'll be the happiest person. Yeah, so we do a lot of gardens in Kruger Park and Selby Sands, all of those big parks, and there's no fences in the camps. So what we do is, it's not gardening per se. It's when they refurbish the lodges, which happens every few years, or they need to build a road, or something needs to happen. Then there's always a bit of destruction of the landscape. So we need to go and fix that to make it look like it's never been touched. And as soon as you go and plant your goodies, which is hard to get because to find those endemic plants, you need to have specialist growers doing it for you. The elephants would come in the night and you just hear crunch, crunch. It's amazing how quiet an elephant can be, actually. But it's quite nice. So it's very special to garden in a place where, I always tell this, we're busy planting some water plants and papyrus and things in the waterways in one of the camps, and the one ranger put his hand on my shoulder and just said, shh. And right across from me, it literally is like 2.5 meters in front of me, there's a leopard drinking water out of the same pond. I didn't even see it. So that is where gardening in South Africa in certain parts, it's quite something very special.
Yeah, so the next time we're moaning about slugs, we need to think on, really.
Yeah. No.
Don't know we're born, really.
Try chase the elephant with a stick out of the garden. It doesn't go that well.
So I thought it was interesting as well what you said about soil conservation. So is that another topic that's kind of very important to you when you garden and in general?
Yeah, of course it is. For instance, here in the Western Cape, good soil, nutrient-rich soil, is very, very scarce. And it's not something that you can find on every property. It's mostly deep sand, beach sand. And there's a big drive, especially from the city council also, that when developments happen, that those soil need to be preserved and then to be either distributed to gardened areas of the city council, or to be retained and then used again at a later stage to top up. So soil conservation, if that's the question that you were asking, definitely very, very important, especially here with us in the Cape.
So you've got a finite amount of topsoil and then you need to just protect that, obviously. But if you did find a garden
it's like gold.
Is it? Well, that's really interesting. Yeah. So if you found a garden where there was just deep sand, is there anything you can do with that? Or do you need to import extra soil?
It depends on what area. So where I am on the West Coast, we have deep sand. So most areas have deep sand. Some of them have good soil that we keep and do preciously to one side. But if you have deep sand, we have a great area which is called the Macland. And we have the most amazing plants and succulents that grow in this sandy dune sand. It seems like there's nothing that can grow in it, but they do wonderfully. That's where a lot of the Arctotus and Gazanias and Lympranthus, Limoniums come from, which you guys also buy in 6-packs there in your nurseries. And this we use for the dunes and all the sages, Chondropetulums, all those beautiful reeds that we've got here. So no, we're very lucky that we have a massive, really big selection of plants that can grow in sand.
So if you go to a region and you're looking at endemic plants, considering your region, for example, do you have a wide palette of plants that you can pick from that are endemic to that region?
Yeah, well, no, we do. Definitely. It's just to find a grower to grow it for us. That's always the problem. So it also depends on which area. The Cape, we're getting there, and we're having a lot of species being available. All the proteas and ericas, and like I said, all these succulents of the macroland is fairly available. But if you go to the more northern areas, where the Kruger Park, that is very, very hard to find, and usually not attainable. So what we have to do is we have to harvest seed. We have to make cuttings of plants in the park, and then have the park nursery grow it for us over a year's time. So there we're not up to scratch to getting the endemic plants. And a lot of them in the Kruger Park, if you've been there, it's not they're pretty to me, but they're not pretty for a garden center.
Yeah.
It's usually lots of thorns, tiny little leaves, and not a lot of flowers. In northern parts of the Kruger Park, that area is not famous for its flowers, so that's why most of them are not grown.
Do you think going forwards, if they get the correct exposure and publicity, that people might warm to those type of plants?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, it's happening. It definitely is. And that's the kind of plant that also saves you money in the long term, because that's not the one that's going to die when we have it was a 10-year drought, and it seems like a 2-year drought now. And that's the kind of plants that also attract the local wildlife, and that's what people like. So, no, most definitely there's an outcry for that instead of planting roses these days.
Are roses popular?
They are. in always in the areas where they can't grow.
We always want what we can't have.
No, they always will be popular. It's a nice plant. They can't be grown in a lot of areas in South Africa, though. We are just too hot. So we have a few where they grow very well in Johannesburg and parts of Cape Town, but there is not really.
No, and if someone was going to have a garden with roses, I'm assuming they're going to need to be irrigated and all the rest of it, kind of artificially propped up.
Yeah, so the water is an issue in the Cape. The city council is very strict for water, so you can't, all the water is monitored per meter, and they will cut you off once you go over your amount. So I think the roses are being used less and less, but in Joburg it's still fine, so people use that.
So it's a bit sort of backwards, really. I should have started with this question, but who inspires you? Who inspires you to garden in the way that you do, or is it just something you kind of feel passionate about and you can't attribute it to a particular thing?
Look, there are designers that do that you kind of affiliate with. You see their passion, you kind of unite because you see yourself in them too. Like James Basson, I think he's a brilliant designer, and I love his plants and his love for plants. And you can see with a designer whether they have a love for plants per se. But I think most of the inspiration, yes, it does come from shows and from designers too, but mostly is in the mountains, on the valleys where you walk, and that's why we do that constantly. We try to go once a week to a mountain or a valley or parts of a desert to go and see what grows, how does the textures work, what plants come together, what looks great. And I think that's where a lot of designers, I hope, also do that. We connect with nature to grassroots in the mountain and see how those things grow and what grows together.
So if anybody wanted to visit South Africa or was planning to, where do you think would be a particularly inspirational place to go?
Ooh, we've got so many.
I know. And I'm wondering if you can think of any that are a little bit more off the beaten track.
Yeah, so first of all, if you come to South Africa and you're a plant lover, well, you're in for a treat because this is a country with just about the most on Earth. So the Western Cape, you cannot leave out. So, but the Western Cape's divided in so many different sections. So I think the best time to come here would be around about July, August. And that's where the spring rains start. And that's when the Namaqualand's in flower. So the Namaqualand is the dry desert area. So that is where we have all the Namaqualand daisies and all your lots of pelargoniums and gazanias and arctotus and all the annuals, and the most bulbs on earth grow there, and they're all in flower then. And that is it's just something spectacular, which I never miss every year. It's just something you never get used to. Then there's Table Mountain and the Cape Peninsula, which is Cape Town. And that's fynbos, proteas and leucospermums, which are pincushions and all your little ericas. And that's in flower kind of from then to a little bit later, which is also a spectacle to see. But if you don't have time during our winter time to be in SA and you want to come in summer, and that's kind of now, then you go to the northern parts. So that is Dahlstrom, Gauteng, Johannesburg, Graskop, Blyde River Canyon. That is all your summer flowering stuff. And they're in flower now, and it's spectacular. I just saw photos today of Dahlstrom, which is in Mpumalanga on the eastern parts. And it's one of the highest populations of terrestrial orchids on Earth, and they're all in flower now. And it's just fields of orchids. So we have lots to give.
You do.
You can go to the Karoo, and the Karoo is just all these huge, big, like alien-like succulents everywhere. And that's also very special.
Yes, it sounds it. Well, I will come one day, hopefully. Will we be seeing you at any of the flower shows?
Yeah, I leave this week. We're going to the Shanghai one for this week. Then we're off to Chaumont and Loire there in France. And then it's which one is it then? Then it's Chelsea, I guess. And then we're doing the Singapore flower show in July.
Brilliant.
So there's quite a few.
Yeah, that is a lot. And where can people follow your work if they wanted to?
Well, they can follow me on Instagram, Leon Kluge, or Facebook. I think that's the two I keep up with.
Yeah, you can't keep up with them all, or you'd lose your sanity.
No,
definitely.
No, exactly.
Brilliant.
Yeah, but come and say hi to us in the UK at the Chelsea Flower Show in the Grand Marquis. This year is going to be a really nice show of spectacular and very rare proteas and fynbos in our stand. So I hope to see you guys there.
As Leon says, go find him at one of the shows if you're planning on going. See the amazing plants from his corner of the world. And hats off to Cape Town, who, from what Leon says, seems to be knocking spots off the UK when it comes to city planning for wildlife. I'd like to say a very big thank you to Leon for taking part. Thank you to the London College of Garden Design for sponsoring this series. Go check out their website, lcgd.org.uk. And thanks very much to you for listening. Catch you all next Tuesday. You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website www.rootsandall.co.uk, where you'll also find my blog and a sign-up form for the newsletter, which gives you a weekly roundup of content, plus the inside scoop on things like upcoming guests. Or you can subscribe wherever you normally get your podcasts. Email me with comments and feedback at podcast@rootsandall.co.uk. Follow me on Twitter, Roots and All, Facebook, Roots and All UK, and Instagram, Roots and All Pod. But please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support my work, because if you like what I do, please help me to continue doing it. Even if you make a one-off donation of £1, trust me, it all helps, and I will be immensely grateful. So please go to Patreon and search for Roots and All.